The stars looked the same as they always did through the viewport of the horizon's edge. Captain Daniel Wright stood alone on the bridge during the night shift, his coffee growing cold in his hand. He had been doing this for 3 years now, volunteering for the lonely hours when most of the crew slept. It kept him from lying awake in his quarters staring at the empty space beside him where his wife used to sleep. She had been gone for 3 years, taken by a disease that even the best medical technology couldn't cure. Some nights Daniel wondered why he kept going, kept pushing deeper into space, kept pretending that exploration and duty could fill the void in his chest. The sensor alarm broke his thoughts. A faint signal was coming from an old mining station about 2 hours away. The station had been abandoned for years, marked on all the charts as derelict and dangerous. Nobody should be there. Daniel checked the readings twice. Life signs, definitely life signs, but weak and irregular. Protocol said to report it and move on. Let the proper authorities handle it. But something made Daniel change course. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was just the need to do something that mattered. He woke his second officer, Helen Price, and told her to take the bridge. She looked at him with concern when he said he was taking a shuttle to investigate personally. Helen had worked with him long enough to know when arguing was pointless. She just made him promise to take a security team and keep his comm link open. Daniel agreed and headed for the shuttle bay. The mining station looked worse up close than it did on the sensors. Half the structure was exposed to vacuum, with hull breaches everywhere. Daniel maneuvered the shuttle carefully through the debris field and docked at one of the few intact airlocks. His security team, 2 young officers named Greg and Amy, checked their weapons and followed him inside. The station was dark except for their helmet lights. The air was thin but breathable in some sections. They followed the life sign readings deeper into the station, through corridors filled with broken equipment and floating garbage. The signal led them to a storage area near what used to be the crew quarters. Daniel heard it before he saw anything, a sound that made his heart clench. Crying. Soft, scared child crying. He pushed through the door and found them huddled behind a stack of supply crates. 2 little girls, identical twins, maybe 7 or 8 years old. They were wearing dirty clothes that had once been nice, and they clutched each other in terror when his light hit them. Daniel immediately removed his helmet and knelt down, trying to make himself less scary. He spoke softly, telling them his name, telling them he was here to help. The girls stared at him with huge eyes. One of them, the one with a small scar on her chin, finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse, like she had been crying for a long time. She said her name was Lily. Her sister was Sophie. They had been here for 3 days. The story came out slowly between sobs and scared whispers. Their father had died 6 months ago. He had been a merchant ship captain, and he had left them some money. Their stepmother Margaret was supposed to take care of them, but she didn't want them. She only wanted the money. Margaret had told them they were going to meet their father's old friend at this mining station. She had brought them here and then left. Just left them in this storage room with a few bottles of water and some food bars. She said someone would come get them. Nobody came. Daniel felt anger rising in his chest, hot and fierce. What kind of person abandoned children like this? He pushed the anger down and focused on the girls. They needed help right now, not his rage. He told them they were safe now. He was going to take them to his ship. They would have food and warm beds, and nobody would hurt them anymore. Sophie started crying harder, but this time it seemed like relief. Lily just nodded and held her sister's hand. Getting the girls back to the shuttle was easy. They weighed almost nothing, and Daniel carried Sophie while Lily held onto his hand. Amy and Greg cleared the path ahead, making sure nothing would scare the children more than they already were. Back on the shuttle, Daniel wrapped both girls in emergency blankets and gave them water. They drank like they hadn't had anything in days, which they probably hadn't. The flight back to the horizon's edge took an hour. Daniel sat with the girls the whole time, answering their questions about the ship and space and where they were going. Lily asked a lot of questions about how the shuttle worked. Sophie mostly stayed quiet, pressed against her sister's side. When they docked, Helen was waiting with Dr. Nathan Cross, the ship's medical officer. Nathan took one look at the girls and immediately started running scans, gentle and efficient. Helen pulled Daniel aside while Nathan worked. She asked what he planned to do. Daniel said he didn't know yet. The girls needed medical care and food and probably counseling. They needed to report this to the authorities and try to find this Margaret woman. They needed to figure out if the girls had any other family. Helen nodded and said she would start making calls. She paused before leaving and told Daniel he did a good thing today. He just shrugged. Nathan finished his examination and reported that the girls were dehydrated and malnourished but otherwise healthy. No serious injuries, though they would need monitoring. He recommended rest and regular meals to build their strength back up. Daniel asked where they should put the girls. The ship didn't exactly have guest quarters for children. Helen suggested converting one of the small conference rooms into a temporary bedroom. It would take a few hours, but they could set up beds and make it comfortable. While the crew worked on the room, Daniel sat with Lily and Sophie in the medical bay. They ate slowly, carefully, like they were afraid the food would disappear. Daniel found himself telling them about his ship, about the crew, about the missions they ran. He told them about Earth, about the colonies, about all the amazing things humans had built among the stars. The girls listened, and slowly, very slowly, they began to relax. That night, after the girls were settled in their new room and finally sleeping, Daniel stood in the corridor outside their door. He could hear them breathing, peaceful and safe. Something had shifted inside him. For 3 years he had been going through the motions of living, doing his duty but feeling nothing. Now looking at those 2 scared little girls, he felt something wake up in his chest. Purpose, protection, a reason to care about tomorrow. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt these children ever again. The first morning was chaos. Daniel woke up early as always, went through his routine, and completely forgot about the 2 children sleeping in the converted conference room until Helen called him. Sophie had woken up screaming from a nightmare, and Lily was trying to comfort her, but both girls were terrified. They didn't remember where they were at first. Daniel rushed to their room still in his sleep shirt and found them huddled together on one bed, shaking. He sat down slowly and reminded them who he was and where they were. Safe. They were safe on his ship. It took 20 minutes to calm Sophie down. Lily stayed quiet but watchful, like she was waiting for something bad to happen. Daniel realized he had no idea what to do next. He was a starship captain. He commanded a crew of 40 trained professionals. He had navigated through asteroid fields and negotiated with hostile alien species. But 2 scared little girls were completely outside his experience. He called Helen again and asked for help. Helen arrived 15 minutes later with breakfast trays and a smile. She had raised 2 kids before joining the space service, and it showed. She talked to the girls in an easy, comfortable way that made them relax. She asked Sophie what she liked to eat and listened carefully when Lily explained that her sister didn't like eggs. Helen nodded like this was the most important information in the world, and promised to make sure the kitchen knew. The girls ate slowly, still cautious, but they ate. After breakfast, Nathan came by to check on them. He was patient and kind, explaining everything he was doing before he did it. He asked permission before touching them, gave them choices about how they wanted to be examined. Lily warmed up to him first, asking questions about his medical equipment. Sophie stayed close to her sister but watched everything with wide, careful eyes. Nathan declared them much better than yesterday and said regular meals would have them back to normal in a week or 2. The problem was what to do with them during the day. The ship was a working vessel and Daniel had duties. He couldn't just sit with them all the time. Helen suggested introducing them to the crew gradually, letting them explore the ship in supervised visits. The crew had already heard about the rescue and everyone wanted to help. Daniel worried about overwhelming the girls, but Helen insisted that routine and interaction would be good for them. The first person they met was Lieutenant Greg Carter, one of the security officers who had helped rescue them. Greg had a gentle way about him despite his size. He showed the girls the observation deck, where they could watch the stars through the big windows. Sophie pressed her face against the glass and stared in wonder. She had never seen space like this before, she said. It was beautiful. Greg smiled and told her she could come here whenever she wanted. Over the next few days, the girls met more of the crew. Amy Chen from security taught them how to play cards. Chief Engineer Paul Martinez showed Lily the engine room and patiently answered her endless questions about how everything worked. Cook Vincent Hayes learned that Sophie loved strawberries and somehow found a way to include them in every meal. Slowly, the ship started to feel less like a strange place and more like home. But the nights were hard. Sophie had nightmares almost every night, waking up crying and calling for her father. Lily would try to soothe her, but often she was crying too. Daniel started sleeping in the corridor outside their room so he could get to them faster when they woke up. He would sit on their beds and tell them stories until they fell back asleep. Old Earth fairy tales, adventures from his own life, anything to distract them from their fear. During one of these night sessions, Lily asked Daniel why he was being so nice to them. The question caught him off guard. He thought about it for a moment and then told them the truth. His wife had died 3 years ago and he had been very lonely. Finding them had reminded him that there were still people who needed him, that maybe he could still do some good in the world. Lily nodded like she understood. Sophie reached out and took his hand. She said she was glad he found them. The ship's schedule meant they had to stay in motion, running their patrol route through the outer systems. But Daniel made sure the girls had structure and routine. Breakfast at the same time every day, lessons in the morning because they needed to keep up with their education. Helen volunteered to teach them basic subjects using the ship's educational programs. Lily soaked up everything, especially mathematics and science. Sophie struggled with the academic work but showed amazing talent when Helen gave her access to the ship's art program. The drawings Sophie created were stunning. She drew the ship, the stars, the crew members. She drew pictures of her and Lily playing in gardens on stations they had visited with their father. She drew pictures of their mother, who she barely remembered but kept alive in her imagination. Helen suggested they print some of the drawings and hang them in the girls' room. Sophie's face lit up at the idea. Soon the walls were covered with her colorful artwork. Lily spent her free time following Paul around the engine room. The chief engineer was patient with her constant questions and even let her help with simple maintenance tasks. She learned the names of every system, every circuit, every component. Paul told Daniel that the girl had a natural gift for understanding how things worked. She could look at a problem and see solutions that took his trained engineers hours to figure out. 3 weeks after the rescue, Daniel received a message from Harmony Station. They needed to dock for resupply, and because the authorities wanted to interview the girls about their abandonment. Daniel's stomach knotted with worry. He didn't want to put Lily and Sophie through more trauma, but he knew it was necessary. They needed to find Margaret and make sure she faced consequences. They also needed to figure out what would happen to the girls long term. He sat down with Lily and Sophie and explained what was going to happen. They would dock at the station. Some people would want to ask them questions about their stepmother and what happened. The girls looked scared, but Lily asked if Daniel would be with them. He promised he wouldn't leave their side. Sophie asked what would happen to them after the questions. Daniel hesitated because he didn't know how to answer. The truth was they would probably be placed in foster care or an orphanage until family could be found. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the girls being sent away to strangers. He thought about Sophie's nightmares and how she had finally started sleeping through the night. He thought about Lily's curious mind and how she had started to smile again. He thought about how the ship felt different now, warmer somehow, filled with the sound of children's laughter. The emptiness that had consumed him for 3 years had started to fade. By morning, he had made a decision. He found Helen in the mess hall and told her he wanted to apply for custody of the girls. Helen nearly dropped her coffee. She asked if he was serious. Daniel said he had never been more serious about anything in his life. Helen pointed out all the obvious problems. He was a starship captain with an unpredictable schedule. He had no experience raising children. The authorities would never approve it. Daniel said he didn't care. He would make it work. He had to try. Helen looked at him for a long moment and then smiled. She said she would help him however she could. The whole crew would help. Daniel felt relief wash over him. He didn't know if it would work, but he had to try. Those 2 little girls had brought light back into his life, and he wasn't ready to let them go. Not without a fight. Harmony Station was one of the biggest civilian stations in the sector, home to nearly 50,000 people. The Horizon's Edge docked on the outer ring, and Daniel felt his anxiety growing as they went through the standard procedures. He had dressed the girls in new clothes that Helen had somehow acquired, simple but clean. Lily held his left hand and Sophie held his right as they walked through the station corridors toward the administrative offices. The child welfare coordinator was a stern woman named Patricia Bennett who looked like she had seen every sad story the universe had to offer. She interviewed the girls separately, which Daniel hated but understood was necessary. He waited outside with Helen, pacing and checking the time every few minutes. When the girls finally came out, they looked exhausted but okay. Patricia said she had everything she needed for now, and the girls could return to the ship while she processed the case. Daniel asked what would happen next. Patricia explained that they would search for Margaret and any other living relatives. In the meantime, the girls would be placed in temporary foster care on the station. Daniel felt his heart drop. He said he wanted to apply for custody. Patricia looked surprised and asked about his qualifications. Daniel admitted he had no experience with children, but he could provide a good home. Patricia said she appreciated his concern, but his lifestyle as a starship captain made him an unsuitable guardian. The girls needed stability, routine, a planet-side home. The argument that followed got heated. Helen had to pull Daniel back and remind him that losing his temper wouldn't help. Patricia agreed to add his application to the file, but she made it clear she didn't think it would be approved. The girls would be transferred to foster care in 3 days. Daniel left the office feeling like he had failed before he even started. Back on the ship, he told Lily and Sophie what was happening. He tried to make it sound okay, tried to tell them that foster care could be nice and they might like the family they stayed with. But Sophie started crying and Lily's face went completely blank. She asked if they did something wrong. Daniel pulled them both into a hug and swore to them that this wasn't their fault. He promised he would fight to keep them. He wouldn't give up. Helen suggested he hire a lawyer. Daniel contacted every family law attorney on the station and finally found one willing to take the case. Her name was Claire Morgan, and she had a reputation for winning impossible cases. She came to the ship to meet with Daniel and the girls. Claire was younger than Daniel expected, maybe in her early 30s with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She listened to the whole story without interrupting, taking notes on her tablet. After the girls left the room, Claire was honest with Daniel. His case was weak. He had no childcare experience, an unstable work schedule, and no permanent home. The courts would favor a traditional family environment. But she said she saw something in the way the girls looked at him, the way they trusted him. She would take the case, but he needed to be prepared for a fight. The fees would be substantial. Daniel said he didn't care about the cost. The first hearing was a disaster. The station's child services presented their case for placing the girls in foster care. They had a family lined up, the Hutchinson family, who had experience with traumatized children and a nice home in the residential sector. The judge seemed impressed. When it was Daniel's turn, Claire did her best, but the facts were against them. He lived on a spaceship. He worked unpredictable hours. He had known the girls for less than a month. The judge ruled that the girls would be placed with the Hutchinson family temporarily while the case continued. Daniel could have supervised visits twice a week. Sophie cried when she heard the decision. Lily didn't cry. She just looked at Daniel with those big, betrayed eyes that made him feel like the worst person in the universe. He tried to explain that he wasn't giving up, that this was just temporary, but he wasn't sure they believed him. Moving the girls to the Hutchinson home was one of the hardest things Daniel had ever done. Alan and Kate Hutchinson seemed nice enough. They had 2 other foster children and spoke kindly to Lily and Sophie. But the girls clung to Daniel and begged him not to leave them. He had to pry Sophie's hands off his jacket while she sobbed. Lily stood frozen, tears running down her face silently. Daniel promised he would see them in 2 days and left before he could break down in front of them. That night, Helen found him in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She didn't say anything, just sat next to him. Daniel said maybe everyone was right. Maybe he wasn't the right person for this. Maybe the girls would be better off with a real family. Helen told him to stop feeling sorry for himself. Those girls needed him and he needed them. If he gave up now, he would regret it for the rest of his life. The next 2 days were torture. Daniel couldn't focus on work. He snapped at his crew and spent most of his time reviewing the case files Claire had sent him. The rules for his visits were strict. He could see the girls for 2 hours at a designated family center, with a supervisor present to observe. When the day finally came, Daniel arrived early and paced the waiting room until Lily and Sophie were brought in. They ran to him and hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. Sophie was crying again, saying she wanted to come home to the ship. Lily was quieter, but she wouldn't let go of his hand the whole visit. They sat in a sad little room with toys and games that nobody touched. Daniel asked how they were doing. Lily said the Hutchinson family was nice, but it wasn't the same. Sophie said she missed her room on the ship and her drawings and Vincent's cooking. She asked when they could come back. Daniel wanted to promise them it would be soon, but he couldn't lie to them. He said he was working on it. He was doing everything he could. They just had to be patient and brave a little longer. The 2 hours went by too fast. When the supervisor said time was up, Sophie clung to Daniel again, and Lily's face went back to that terrible blank expression. Daniel left feeling worse than before. Claire called him that evening with news. She had been digging into Margaret's background and found something interesting. Margaret had been married twice before, both times to widowers with young children. In both cases, she had gained access to family money and then disappeared, leaving the children behind. Claire thought they could use this pattern to show that Margaret was a predator who deliberately targeted vulnerable families. The discovery gave Daniel hope. If they could prove Margaret was unfit and dangerous, it would strengthen his case. Claire also suggested they start building evidence of his bond with the girls. She wanted testimony from the crew about how the girls had thrived on the ship. She wanted documentation of the routines he had established, the care he had provided. She wanted to show the court that despite his unconventional lifestyle, he could provide a loving, stable home. Over the next few weeks, the crew rallied around Daniel. Helen wrote a detailed statement about the girls' progress. Nathan provided medical records showing their improvement. Paul talked about Lily's engineering aptitude and how he had been mentoring her. Vincent described the special meals he made for Sophie. Even Greg and Amy gave statements about the rescue and how protective Daniel had been from the very beginning. The second hearing went better. Claire presented all the new evidence, including the information about Margaret's past. She called Helen to testify, and Helen was brilliant. She described in detail how the girls had gone from terrified and withdrawn to happy and curious under Daniel's care. She talked about the bond they had formed, how they called for him when they had nightmares, how they trusted him completely. Then Claire did something unexpected. She requested that the judge allow Lily and Sophie to testify. The judge was hesitant because of their age, but Claire argued that their voices deserved to be heard. The judge agreed to a private session in chambers. Daniel wasn't allowed to be present, but Claire told him later what happened. The girls had been clear and articulate. They wanted to live with Captain Daniel. He made them feel safe. He was kind and patient. He read them stories and answered their questions and never made them feel like they were in the way. The judge didn't rule immediately. She said she needed time to consider everything. But her expression had softened when she looked at Daniel, and he dared to hope. 2 weeks later, the ruling came. The judge granted Daniel temporary custody for 1 year, with regular check-ins and evaluations. If everything went well, the custody would become permanent. The girls could return to the ship immediately. Daniel picked up Lily and Sophie that same day. They packed their few belongings and practically ran to the shuttle. When they got back to the ship, the entire crew was waiting in the docking bay. They had decorated the corridor with streamers and welcome home signs. Sophie burst into tears, but this time they were happy tears. Lily smiled, really smiled, for the first time since they had been taken away. Daniel felt something tight in his chest finally relax. They were home. His girls were home. Having the girls back on the ship felt right, but Daniel knew things couldn't stay the same. The temporary custody ruling came with conditions. The girls needed proper education, regular social interaction with other children, and a stable environment. Living on a deep space exploration vessel that could be gone for months at a time didn't exactly meet those requirements. Daniel spent sleepless nights trying to figure out how to make it work. The answer came during a conversation with Helen. She mentioned that the Colony Support Division was looking for experienced captains. The routes were different from exploration work, mostly running supplies between established colonies and responding to emergencies. It meant staying in populated sectors, regular docking at major stations, predictable schedules. It also meant giving up the frontier exploration that had defined Daniel's career. He thought about it for exactly 1 night. The next morning, he submitted a transfer request. His commanding officer, Admiral Lisa Grant, called him personally. She said she understood his reasons, but reminded him that he was one of their best exploration captains. Giving that up for supply runs seemed like a waste of his talents. Daniel said his talents didn't matter if he couldn't provide a home for his daughters. Lisa was quiet for a moment, then said she respected his choice. The transfer was approved. The crew took the news with mixed reactions. Some were disappointed because they loved the excitement of exploration. Others, especially those who had gotten close to Lily and Sophie, completely understood. Helen said she would put in for a transfer too if Daniel wanted her. He was grateful but told her she should follow her own career path. She deserved better than babysitting supply runs. Helen just smiled and said some things were more important than career advancement. The Horizon's Edge was reassigned to the Centauri sector, which included a dozen established colonies and several major stations. Their home base would be New Portland Station, a sprawling civilian installation that orbited a gas giant. The station had excellent schools, parks, shopping districts, everything a family might need. Daniel could keep his ship in his command while giving the girls a stable home base. Setting up their quarters on New Portland took 2 weeks. Daniel found a small residential unit in the family sector, 3 rooms with a kitchen and a view of the gas giant's rings. It felt strange to have a home that wasn't on a ship, but the girls loved it immediately. Sophie claimed the smaller bedroom and started planning how to decorate it. Lily wanted the room with the desk so she could study. They explored the station, together finding the schools, the parks, the recreation areas. Enrolling the girls in school was nerve-wracking. Daniel met with the principal, a patient man named George Phillips, and explained their situation. George had dealt with plenty of military families and spacer kids. He understood the unique challenges. He suggested starting Lily and Sophie in a grade below their age level to help them adjust. They had missed a lot of school during the trauma of losing their father and being abandoned. Better to build their confidence than push them too hard. The first day of school was harder on Daniel than on the girls. He walked them to their classroom and met their teacher, a kind woman named Linda Hayes, who specialized in helping kids who had experienced trauma. Linda promised to keep a close eye on them and report any problems. Daniel hugged the girls goodbye and forced himself to leave. He spent the whole morning distracted, checking his comm every 5 minutes. When he picked them up that afternoon, they were buzzing with excitement. Sophie had made a friend named Emma, who also loved to draw. Lily had impressed her teacher with her math skills. They both said the day had been good, really good. Daniel felt relief wash over him. Maybe this would actually work. The new assignment meant different work for the Horizon's Edge. Instead of charting unexplored systems, they hauled supplies to mining colonies and agricultural settlements. They responded to medical emergencies and equipment failures. It wasn't glamorous, but it was important. The colonies depended on ships like his to survive. Daniel found satisfaction in the work, even if it wasn't as exciting as exploration. The schedule was predictable, which was exactly what they needed. 2 weeks running routes, 1 week docked at New Portland. During the docked weeks, Daniel was just another dad. He helped with homework and made dinner and attended school events. He met other parents and tried to make small talk even though he felt awkward. The other parents seemed curious about the spacer captain raising 2 girls alone, but most were kind. Sophie thrived in her art classes. Her teacher, a former professional, artist named Carol Reed, recognized her talent immediately. Carol started giving Sophie extra projects and encouraged her to enter a youth art competition. Sophie was nervous but excited. She spent hours working on her submission, a painting of the Horizon's Edge against a star field. The love she had for the ship showed in every brushstroke. Lily discovered her love for robotics. The school had a program where kids could build and program simple robots. She joined the team and quickly became one of their best members. Her engineering instincts and the time she had spent with Paul in the engine room gave her an advantage. The team coach, a retired engineer named Frank White, told Daniel that Lily had extraordinary potential. With the right education, she could do amazing things. Watching his daughters grow and thrive made every sacrifice worth it. Daniel had given up exploration, the work he loved, but he had gained something infinitely more valuable. He had a family. He had a reason to come home. The loneliness that had defined his life for 3 years had been replaced by homework sessions and bedtime stories and Sunday morning pancakes. The custody evaluation happened 6 months into their new life. A social worker named Jennifer Cole came to observe their home and interview the girls. She watched Daniel make breakfast and help Sophie with her art project. She talked to the girls' teachers and reviewed their school records. She visited the ship and interviewed crew members. Daniel was nervous the entire time, terrified that something would go wrong. Jennifer's report was glowing. She noted the stable routine, the strong bond between Daniel and the girls, their progress in school and social development. She observed that while their living situation was unconventional, it was working beautifully. The girls were happy, healthy, and thriving. She recommended that the temporary custody be made permanent. The final hearing was scheduled for 3 months later. Claire told Daniel it was just a formality at this point. The judge would review Jennifer's report and the school records and almost certainly approve permanent custody. But Daniel couldn't relax until it was official. He had learned that nothing was guaranteed, that happy endings could be snatched away in an instant. During this time, something unexpected happened. The search for Margaret finally bore fruit. She had been located on a frontier world called Redemption, living under a false name. The authorities were preparing to charge her with child abandonment and fraud. But then Margaret did something that sent Daniel's world into chaos. She filed a counter-petition for custody of the girls. Claire called with the news and Daniel felt his blood run cold. Margaret claimed she had been suffering from a mental breakdown when she left the girls. She said she had sought treatment and was now recovered. She wanted to make amends and resume her role as their mother. The legal system, in its infinite wisdom, was required to give her a hearing. Lily and Sophie were devastated when Daniel told them. Sophie cried for hours, saying she never wanted to see Margaret again. Lily went quiet and withdrawn, reverting to the scared child she had been when Daniel first found her. The nightmares came back, worse than before. Both girls started having trouble sleeping, afraid that Margaret would somehow take them away. Daniel tried to stay calm for their sake, but inside he was panicking. Everything they had built over the past 6 months felt fragile suddenly. Claire assured him that Margaret's case was weak. Her history of abandonment, the pattern of targeting widowers, the clear evidence of her crimes, all worked against her. But the law required they give her a chance to present her case. The hearing was set for 2 weeks before the permanent custody decision. Claire said the timing was actually good. They could deal with Margaret's petition and the custody finalization at the same time. But Daniel couldn't shake the fear that somehow, despite everything, the system might fail them. He had seen, too, many impossible things happen in his life to trust in certainty. Helen found him one night in the observation deck of the ship, staring out at the stars like he used to do before the girls came into his life. She asked if he was okay. Daniel said he was terrified. What if they lost? What if Margaret won? What if he had to watch Lily and Sophie be taken away by the woman who had abandoned them? Helen put her hand on his shoulder and told him to have faith. They had the truth on their side, and the love he had for those girls was obvious to anyone who looked. Margaret didn't stand a chance. The 2 weeks before the hearing passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Claire worked around the clock, building their case and preparing for every possible argument Margaret's lawyer might make. She interviewed the girls again, gently but thoroughly, documenting everything they remembered about their stepmother. The memories were painful. Margaret had been cold and cruel, telling them their father never really loved them, that they were burdens she was stuck with. She had taken their inheritance money and spent it on herself while feeding them the cheapest food she could find. Daniel barely slept. He kept imagining worst-case scenarios, kept seeing Sophie's terrified face when she learned Margaret was coming back. Lily had stopped talking almost entirely, communicating mostly in nods and shakes of her head. Her teacher called to say she was worried. Lily was withdrawing from her friends and her grades were slipping. Daniel felt helpless. He couldn't promise them everything would be okay because he didn't know if it would be. The night before the hearing, Daniel sat both girls down for a serious talk. He told them that tomorrow would be hard. They would have to see Margaret, maybe have to talk about what happened. But he promised them he would be there every second. He wouldn't let Margaret hurt them again.
Sophie crawled into his lap like she used to when she first came to the ship.
Lily sat close beside him, holding his hand so tight it hurt. They stayed like that for a long time, just being together. The hearing was held in a formal courtroom on Harmony Station. Daniel wore his dress uniform because Claire said it would remind the judge that he was a respected military officer. The girls wore nice dresses that Helen had helped them pick out. They looked so small and scared walking into that big courtroom. Daniel wanted to grab them and run, take them somewhere safe where Margaret could never find them. Margaret arrived with her lawyer, a slick man named Carl Stevens, who specialized in family reunification cases. Daniel got his first look at the woman who had abandoned his daughters, and he felt rage burn in his chest. She looked perfectly put together, expensive clothes and carefully styled hair. She even managed to look sad and remorseful, like she was the victim in all this. It made him sick. The proceedings started with Margaret's petition. Carl presented her case, painting her as a grieving stepmother who had suffered a mental breakdown after her husband's death. He had medical records showing she had checked herself into a treatment facility on redemption. He had doctors willing to testify that she was now stable and ready to resume parenting. He argued that children belonged with family when possible, and Margaret was legally the girl's stepmother. She deserved a chance to make things right. Claire objected repeatedly, pointing out the holes in Margaret's story. The treatment facility wasn't contacted until after she learned the authorities were looking for her. The doctors had only seen her for a few weeks, not nearly enough time to diagnose and treat a serious mental health crisis. And, most damning, she had made no attempt to contact the girls or check on their welfare during the entire time she claimed to be recovering. Then it was time for Margaret to testify. She took the stand and put on a performance worthy of an actress. She cried delicately while describing how devastated she was when her husband died. She said she loved Lily and Sophie like they were her own children. The abandonment had been a terrible mistake, made when she wasn't in her right mind. She had been getting help and working hard to become the mother the girls deserved. She just wanted a chance to prove she had changed. Daniel watched the judge's face, trying to read her reaction. Judge Alice Crawford was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She listened to Margaret's testimony without expression, occasionally making notes. When Carl finished his questions, it was Claire's turn. Claire's cross-examination was brutal. She asked Margaret to explain the money. Where had the inheritance gone? Margaret claimed medical bills and living expenses. Claire produced bank records showing purchases at luxury hotels, casinos, and high-end stores. Margaret stumbled, trying to explain. Claire asked about Margaret's previous marriages. Margaret said they weren't relevant. Claire disagreed and presented evidence of the pattern. 2 previous widowers with children, 2 previous disappearances with money. By the time Claire finished, Margaret's careful composure had cracked. She looked angry and defensive instead of sad and remorseful. Carl tried to do damage control, but the harm was done. The judge called a short recess. Daniel took the girls to a private room where they could sit quietly. Neither of them wanted to talk. They just wanted it to be over. When the hearing resumed, it was the defense's turn. Claire called Helen first. Helen testified about finding the girls on the mining station, about their condition, about how terrified they were. She described the 3 days they had been left alone, how close they had come to dying. She talked about Daniel's immediate care and protection, about how he had sat with them through nightmares and gradually helped them feel safe again. Nathan testified next, providing medical evidence of malnutrition and dehydration when the girls were rescued. He described their ongoing treatment and their remarkable recovery. He stated clearly that returning the girls to Margaret would be psychologically harmful, possibly severely so. They had trauma associated with her that might never fully heal. Then came testimony from the girls' teachers and the social worker. Everyone painted the same picture. Lily and Sophie were thriving in Daniel's care. They had stable routines, good education, strong social connections. They were happy and healthy. Removing them from this environment would be cruel and unnecessary. Finally, Claire requested that Lily and Sophie be allowed to testify. Carl objected strongly, arguing that the girls were too young and had been coached. Judge Crawford considered and then agreed to a private session in her chambers. Only the judge, a court recorder, and the lawyers would be present. Daniel had to wait outside, which made him anxious, but he trusted Claire to protect them. The session lasted almost an hour. When the girls came out, both had been crying, but they seemed okay. Claire came out behind them looking satisfied. She told Daniel it had gone well. The girls had been clear and consistent. They didn't want to see Margaret. They wanted to stay with Daniel. The judge had been gentle but thorough in her questioning. The hearing concluded with final arguments. Carl made his case for family reunification and second chances. Claire argued that Margaret had forfeited her rights through abandonment and fraud, that the girls' well-being had to come first, that Daniel had proven himself to be an excellent father. Judge Crawford said she would review all the evidence and issue her ruling within 1 week. That week was agony. Daniel tried to maintain normal routines, but everything felt uncertain. The girls were clingy and anxious, afraid to let him out of their sight. Sophie's nightmares got worse. Lily barely ate. Daniel spent every free moment with them, trying to provide comfort and reassurance he didn't fully feel himself. Claire called on the 6th day. She had just received the judge's ruling. Daniel's heart pounded as he waited for her to continue. Claire's voice was warm when she delivered the news. Judge Crawford had denied Margaret's petition completely. She had ruled that Margaret was unfit, and her parental rights were being permanently terminated. More than that, she was approving Daniel's petition for permanent custody. Lily and Sophie were officially his daughters. Daniel had to sit down. The relief was so intense it made him dizzy. Claire continued, saying the judge had written a scathing opinion about Margaret's actions and credibility. She had praised Daniel's dedication and the clear bond between him and the girls. The ruling was final unless Margaret appealed, and Claire doubted any appeals court would overturn such a clear decision. When Daniel told the girls, they couldn't quite believe it at first. He had to explain it twice. Margaret was gone. She couldn't come back. They would stay with him forever. Sophie started crying and launched herself at Daniel, hugging him so hard he could barely breathe. Lily's face finally relaxed, the tension she had been carrying for weeks melting away. She whispered thank you over and over. That night, Daniel let them stay up late. They made popcorn and watched old Earth movies in their quarters on the station. The girls fell asleep on either side of him on the couch, safe and content. Daniel sat there in the quiet, feeling more at peace than he had in years. His family was safe. His daughters were his. Nothing and no one could take that away now. The adoption ceremony was small but perfect. Claire had suggested making it official through a formal adoption rather than just custody, giving the girls his last name and making their family status absolutely clear. Daniel agreed immediately. The ceremony was held in a quiet courtroom on New Portland Station, with just the crew and a few close friends attending. Judge Crawford presided, the same judge who had ruled in their favor. When the judge asked if Lily and Sophie wanted to take the name Wright, both girls said yes without hesitation. Daniel had to blink back tears. The judge signed the papers and declared them officially a family. Helen had brought a cake and they had a small celebration in one of the station's private rooms. The girls were grinning so wide their faces must have hurt. For the first time, they introduced Daniel as their dad instead of Captain Daniel. He had never heard a word that sounded so good. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. The legal battles were over, the uncertainty gone. Daniel could finally relax and just be a father. He got better at the everyday things like helping with homework and braiding Sophie's hair. He learned to cook more than basic meals, though Vincent still gave him tips over calm. He attended parent-teacher conferences and school plays and art shows. Sophie's talent for art continued to grow. She won the youth competition with her painting of the Horizon's Edge, beating out kids twice her age. The prize included a scholarship to an advanced art program that met on weekends. Sophie was so excited she could barely contain herself. Carol, her teacher, told Daniel that Sophie had the potential to become a professional artist if she wanted. Her work had an emotional depth that was rare in someone so young. The art program connected Sophie with other talented young artists across the sector. They met virtually most of the time, but once a month there was an in-person session on Harmony Station. Daniel made sure his schedule allowed him to take her every time. He would sit in the observation area and watch her work alongside other kids, completely in her element. She had found her passion and her community. Lily's path was equally clear but different. Her robotics team made it to the sector championships, competing against schools from a dozen different colonies. Daniel took time off to attend, bringing Sophie and Helen along to cheer. Lily's team didn't win, but they placed third, and Lily was chosen as the most valuable team member. Frank, her coach, pulled Daniel aside and said they needed to talk about Lily's future. Frank explained that Lily was operating at a level far beyond her age group. She understood complex engineering concepts intuitively and could solve problems that stumped older students. He recommended she apply to Armstrong Academy, one of the most prestigious engineering schools in human space. It was located on Mars and accepted students as young as 12 for their accelerated program. Lily would be challenged there in a way regular school couldn't match. Daniel's first reaction was no. Lily was only 10. She was too young to go away to school. But Frank asked him to at least discuss it with her. Lily deserved to know about the opportunity. Daniel agreed reluctantly. That night, he sat down with both girls and explained about Armstrong Academy. Lily's eyes lit up when she heard about the program, the advanced classes, the chance to work with real engineers on actual projects. Sophie asked if that meant Lily would leave. The excitement drained from Lily's face. She said she didn't want to go if it meant leaving them. Daniel felt his heart break a little. He told them they didn't have to decide anything right now. Lily was only 10. She had time to think about it. They would figure it out together as a family. Work on the horizon's edge continued smoothly. The colony support missions were predictable but satisfying. They delivered medical supplies to remote outposts, transported equipment to mining operations, evacuated sick or injured workers who needed hospital care. The crew was happy with the new routine. Several of them had started families of their own since transferring to the sector, appreciating the regular schedule. Daniel's command style had changed too. He was still professional and competent, but there was a warmth there that hadn't existed before. He understood now what his crew with families went through, the constant balancing act between duty and home life. He was more flexible with schedules, more understanding when someone needed time off for a kid's school event. The crew loved Lily and Sophie. When the girls were on the ship during school breaks, they were treated like mascots. Paul let Lily help with minor repairs. Vincent taught Sophie how to make her favorite desserts. Greg showed them self-defense moves. Amy taught them to play strategy games. The ship felt more like a home than it ever had when it was just Daniel. On Sophie's 11th birthday, the crew threw a surprise party in the mess hall. They had decorated with streamers and balloons, and Vincent had made an elaborate cake shaped like a paintbrush. Sophie was overwhelmed with joy. She went around hugging everyone, thanking them for being her family. Lily helped her open presents, mostly art supplies and books. Daniel gave her a professional-grade digital art tablet that made her cry happy tears. Lily's birthday was quieter at her request. She wanted just family, which meant Daniel, Sophie, and Helen. They had dinner at a nice restaurant on the station, and then went to the engineering museum. Lily dragged them through every exhibit, explaining how everything worked with enthusiasm that made the docents smile. Daniel got her an advanced robotics kit and a set of actual engineering tools. Lily hugged him and said it was the best birthday ever. As the girls approached their 1-year anniversary of the adoption, Daniel started thinking about making their living situation more permanent. The residential unit on New Portland was nice, but it was small and felt temporary. He started looking at larger apartments, maybe even a small house in one of the station's residential domes. Somewhere the girls could really spread out, have space for Sophie's art studio and Lily's workshop. Helen helped him search listings and tour properties. They found a perfect place in a quiet section of the family dome, 3 bedrooms, a large common area, and a bonus room that could be divided into studio space and a workshop. Big windows with a view of the gas giant. It was expensive, but Daniel had been saving his pay for years with nothing to spend it on. Now he had a reason. He showed the girls the property listing and asked what they thought. Sophie loved it immediately, already planning how to decorate her room. Lily was more practical, asking about the workshop space and whether it had good ventilation for soldering. Daniel said they could make it work however they needed. Did they want it? Both girls said yes. The move took a month to coordinate with his ship schedule. The crew helped, carrying boxes and furniture with good-natured complaints about how much stuff 3 people could accumulate. By the time they finished, the new place felt like a real home. Sophie's artwork covered the walls. Lily's engineering projects occupied every surface in her workshop. Family photos that Helen had taken were scattered throughout the common areas. Daniel stood in the living room after the girls had gone to bed on their first night in the new place and felt something settle in his chest. This was home. Not just a place to sleep between ship runs, but a real home. A place where his daughters would grow up, where they would bring friends and make memories, a place that would be theirs for as long as they needed it. The year review with social services was a formality. Jennifer came to the new house and was clearly impressed. She interviewed the girls separately, and both were enthusiastic about their life. She reviewed their school records, their medical files, their social activities. Everything was perfect. She told Daniel he had done an amazing job, and she was closing the case. There would be no more check-ins or evaluations. The adoption was complete and final. That night, Daniel took the girls out for ice cream to celebrate. They sat at an outdoor table in one of the station's park domes, watching the artificial sunset. Sophie was telling a story about something funny that happened in art class. Lily was laughing. Daniel just listened and felt grateful. 3 years ago, he had been a lonely widower going through the motions of living. Now he had a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning with a smile. The universe worked in strange ways sometimes. 2 years passed in what felt like both forever and the blink of an eye. Lily turned 12 and Sophie turned 12 6 minutes later, as she always reminded everyone. The girls had grown taller, more confident, more themselves. Sophie had developed her own artistic style that people were starting to recognize. Lily had advanced so far in her studies that her regular school couldn't keep up anymore. The question of Armstrong Academy came up again, this time more seriously. Lily had been accepted into their Young Scholars program with a full scholarship. The academy wanted her to start in the fall semester. It was an incredible opportunity, the kind that could shape her entire future. But it meant leaving home for most of the year, only coming back for holidays and summer break. Daniel struggled with the decision. Part of him wanted to keep Lily close, to protect her from the world a little longer. She was only 12, but another part of him knew that holding her back would be selfish. She needed challenges, needed to grow, needed to pursue her gifts. He talked to Helen about it late one night. Helen said he already knew what the right choice was, he just didn't want to admit it. The hardest part was Sophie. The twins had never been apart for more than a few days. They shared a bond that Daniel didn't fully understand but deeply respected. Sophie was terrified of Lily leaving. She had nightmares about being alone, about losing her sister the way they had lost their parents. Lily felt torn between her dreams and her loyalty to Sophie. Daniel called a family meeting to discuss it properly. All three of them sat in the living room, and Daniel laid out the facts. Armstrong Academy was an amazing opportunity for Lily. It would be hard to be apart, but they would talk every day through video calls. Lily would come home for breaks. This wasn't goodbye forever, just a different chapter. He asked both girls what they wanted. Lily admitted she really wanted to go. She loved engineering, and the academy offered classes she had been dreaming about, but she couldn't stand the thought of Sophie being sad. Sophie was quiet for a long time, and then she said something that surprised them both. She said Lily should go. It would be hard, and she would miss her sister every day, but she didn't want to be the reason Lily gave up her dreams. They would make it work because that's what families did. The decision was made. Lily would attend Armstrong Academy starting in the fall. The next few months were a flurry of preparation, shopping for everything Lily would need, filling out endless paperwork, arranging travel. Sophie threw herself into creating a special gift for her sister, a painted journal where Lily could document her experiences. Lily built Sophie a custom communication device so they could talk, anytime without using the standard station equipment. The day came to take Lily to Mars. Daniel had arranged for extended leave so he could help her get settled. They traveled on a passenger liner, the three of them squeezed into a small cabin. Sophie barely left Lily's side the whole trip. They whispered to each other late into the night, making promises and sharing secrets. Armstrong Academy was impressive, a sprawling campus built into the Martian landscape with massive domes protecting it from the harsh environment. The facilities were incredible, with workshops and labs that made Lily's eyes go wide with excitement. Her roommate was a girl named Kara Chen from Europa, also 12, also obsessed with engineering. They hit it off immediately, talking in technical jargon that Daniel barely understood. Settling Lily into her dorm room was bittersweet. She was so clearly thrilled to be there, so ready for this new adventure, but she was also Daniel's little girl, and leaving her felt wrong on some fundamental level. Sophie helped arrange Lily's things, putting up photos and organizing her supplies. When it was time to say goodbye, all three of them cried. Daniel hugged Lily tight and told her he was so proud of her. She should work hard and learn everything she could and call home whenever she needed anything. Lily promised she would make him proud. Sophie's goodbye took longer. The twins held each other and cried, making promises to talk every single day. Finally, Daniel had to gently pull Sophie away. They left Lily standing in front of her dorm, waving until they were out of sight. The trip back to New Portland was quiet. Sophie stared out the window and didn't say much. Daniel tried to engage her in conversation, but she just nodded or gave short answers. He understood. She was grieving in her own way. When they got home, the house felt too big and too quiet. Sophie went straight to her room and didn't come out for dinner. Daniel gave her space for a day, then gently knocked on her door. She let him in, and he found her surrounded by sketches. She had been drawing Lily, memory portraits from different moments of their lives together. Daniel sat with her, and they talked about how much they both missed her already. Sophie admitted she didn't know how to be just herself without her twin. Daniel said maybe this was a chance for her to figure that out. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Lily called every evening like clockwork, full of stories about her classes and her new friends. She loved the academy and was thriving in the challenging environment. Sophie was happy for her but struggled with the loneliness. Daniel noticed she spent more time on her art, channeling her feelings into her work. Something unexpected happened. Without Lily around, Sophie started coming out of her shell in new ways. She had always been the quieter twin, letting Lily take the lead in most situations. Now she had to be more independent. She joined a drama club at school and discovered she loved performing. She made new friends who knew her as just Sophie, not as one of the twins. Daniel's career took an unexpected turn as well. Admiral Lisa Grant contacted him with an offer. The Deep Space Division was creating a new position, coordinating colony support across multiple sectors. It would mean a promotion to Admiral and a more administrative role, but he could stay based at New Portland. The work would be important and challenging. After talking it over with the girls, Daniel accepted. The promotion ceremony was held on the Horizon's edge. The crew who had been with him from the beginning attended, along with Sophie and Lily, who came home for the event. Helen pinned the new rank insignia on his uniform and the crew applauded. Daniel gave a short speech about how the best missions were the ones that brought people home safely, that connected families, that built futures. He thanked his crew and his daughters for teaching him what really mattered. As Admiral, Daniel had more influence over policy. He started pushing for better support systems for families in space. He advocated for improved education programs on stations, better mental health resources, stronger child welfare protections. He used his own story as an example of why these things mattered. His voice carried weight, and slowly changes started happening. Sophie's art continued to evolve. At 13, she had a solo exhibition at the New Portland Cultural Center. Her pieces explored themes of family, separation, and connection. The centerpiece was a large painting of two girls reaching for each other across a starfield, clearly representing her and Lily. Critics praised her emotional depth and technical skill. Several pieces sold for impressive amounts, money that went into a trust fund for her future. Lily's progress at Armstrong Academy was remarkable. She published her first engineering paper at 13, a new approach to recycling systems for long-term space habitation. The paper was co-authored with one of her professors and got attention from several major aerospace companies. She was already being courted for internships and future positions. When she came home for summer break, she had grown more confident and mature, but she was still the same Lily who loved her sister and father fiercely. The summer the girls turned 14, Daniel took them on a special trip. He had been saving for something meaningful, and he surprised them with a tour of Earth. Neither girl had ever been to humanity's homeworld. They spent 3 weeks visiting historical sites, museums, and natural wonders. They saw the Grand Canyon and the Great Wall and the pyramids. They swam in an ocean for the first time. One evening, sitting on a beach watching the sunset, Sophie said this was the best summer of her life. Lily agreed. Daniel sat between his daughters and felt complete. They had been through so much together, faced so many challenges, overcome so many obstacles. They had built something beautiful from tragedy and loss. They were a family in every way that mattered. As they watched the waves roll in, Daniel thought about that day 5 years ago, when he found 2 terrified little girls in an abandoned mining station. He had saved them, yes, but they had saved him too. They had given him purpose and love and a reason to live. They had taught him that family wasn't about blood or biology. It was about showing up every day, about choosing to love and protect each other no matter what. 5 years after finding 2 frightened girls in an abandoned mining station, Admiral Daniel Wright stood at a podium on New Portland Station addressing a crowd of military personnel, government officials, and civilians. The occasion was the commissioning of a new vessel, but not just any vessel. The ship behind him, gleaming and new, represented something he had been fighting for since his promotion. The ship was called Mercy's Light, and it was the first vessel specifically designed for search and rescue operations in frontier space. Equipped with advanced sensors, medical facilities, and a crew trained in trauma response, its mission was to find lost and abandoned people, especially children, and bring them to safety. It was everything Daniel had wished existed when he found Lily and Sophie. Standing beside him in cadet uniforms were his daughters, now 17 years old and remarkable young women. Lily had graduated early from Armstrong Academy, with the highest honors in the school's history. She had already been accepted to the Advanced Engineering program at New Earth Technical Institute, but she had deferred for a year to work on the Mercy's Light project. Many of the ship's rescue systems had been designed or improved by her. Sophie had become well known in the art world, her work featured in galleries across human space. She had turned down several prestigious scholarships to stay close to home for 1 more year, wanting to be part of this moment. The dedication mural on the Mercy's Light's main corridor was her creation, a breathtaking piece showing hands reaching across the darkness to connect and protect. Daniel began his speech, his voice carrying across the crowd. He talked about the mission of exploration and expansion, about how humans had spread across the galaxy seeking new worlds and opportunities. But he said the greatest strength of humanity wasn't technology or ambition, it was compassion. It was the choice to help others, to protect the vulnerable, to create family and community, even in the cold darkness of space. He told the story of finding Lily and Sophie. Though most people in the crowd already knew it, their story had become somewhat famous, an example of the good that could happen when someone chose to care. He described that moment in the abandoned station when he decided to investigate, instead of reporting and moving on. How that single choice had changed 3 lives forever. The girls had asked to speak as well. Lily went first, talking about the importance of the Mercy's Light mission. She shared statistics about how many people, especially children, went missing in frontier space every year. Some were abandoned like she and Sophie had been. Others were orphaned by accidents or lost in emergencies. Too many died before help could reach them. The Mercy's Light would change that. She explained the ship's systems with enthusiasm, describing the advanced scanners that could detect life signs across greater distances, the medical bay equipped to handle trauma and malnutrition, the comfortable quarters designed to help rescued individuals feel safe. She talked about the crew selection process, how they had chosen people with backgrounds in counseling and child welfare, not just technical skills. Sophie spoke about the emotional side of rescue. She described what it felt like to be abandoned, to believe nobody was coming, to lose hope. She talked about the terror and confusion, about how it felt when Daniel appeared like an answer to prayers they had stopped praying. She said the Mercy's Light wasn't just about saving lives in a physical sense. It was about saving spirits, about showing people they mattered, that someone cared enough to find them. Her voice broke with emotion when she described how Daniel had given them a home and a family, how he had fought for them when nobody thought he could win, how he had sacrificed his career ambitions to give them stability and love. She said every child the Mercy's Light rescued would get the same chance they had gotten, the chance to heal, to grow, to thrive, to become whoever they were meant to be. The crowd was silent, many people wiping away tears. Daniel felt his own eyes burning. His girls had grown into such incredible humans, strong and compassionate and brilliant. Everything he had hoped for them and more. The commissioning ceremony concluded with the traditional breaking of a bottle against the hull. Sophie had the honor, smashing the bottle with a grin. The Mercy's Light was officially in service. Its first captain, Commander Lisa Hayes, a former trauma counselor turned ship commander, stood ready to lead the mission. After the ceremony, there was a reception. People came up to congratulate Daniel and meet the girls. Several officials wanted to discuss expanding the rescue program to other sectors. Media representatives asked for interviews. It was overwhelming in the best way. The idea that had started as Daniel's personal mission was becoming something bigger, something that could help countless families. Helen found them in a quiet corner, away from the crowds. She hugged each of the girls and told them their speeches were perfect. She had been promoted to captain and given command of the Horizon's Edge. Daniel couldn't think of anyone better for the job. Helen said she was proud of all of them, of what they had built together. Later that evening, Daniel and the girls went home to their house in the family dome. It was full of memories now. 5 years of laughter and arguments and homework and meals together. They ordered dinner from their favorite restaurant and sat around the table like they had done 1,000 times before. Lily talked about her plans for the next year. She would work with the Mercy's Light crew, refining the systems and training the engineers. Then she would start at New Earth Technical Institute, pursuing advanced degrees in aerospace engineering. Her dream was to design ships that could travel farther and faster, opening up new regions of space for exploration. Sophie talked about her art school plans. She had been accepted to the Interstellar Arts Conservatory, a prestigious program that would let her study with master artists from across human space. She wanted to create art that told stories, that made people feel connected even across the vast distances of space. She had already been commissioned to create pieces for 3 new colony stations. Daniel listened to them plan their futures and felt pride mixed with sadness. They were ready to leave, ready to pursue their own paths. It was what he had raised them for, but it didn't make it easier. They would always be his little girls, even when they were off changing the world. Sophie seemed to read his thoughts. She reached across the table and took his hand. She said no matter where they went or what they did, they would always be a family. They would always come home. Lily agreed, taking his other hand. They sat like that for a moment, connected and complete. The next few months passed quickly. The Mercy's Light completed its shakedown cruise and began active operations. Within the first month, they rescued 8 people from various situations. A family whose transport had broken down in an uncharted system. A teenager who had run away and gotten lost. 3 children whose guardian had died suddenly, leaving them stranded. Each person was brought to safety, given medical care and counseling, and helped to find their next steps. The program expanded faster than anyone expected. Other sectors requested similar ships. Training programs were established to prepare crews for rescue work. Funding poured in from governments and private donors. Within a year, 5 more rescue vessels were in operation. The number of successful rescues climbed into the hundreds. Daniel received recognition for his role in creating the program, but he always deflected credit to the people doing the actual work. He said he had just suggested the idea. The crews were the real heroes going into dangerous situations to save strangers. He was proud to have played a part, but the success belonged to everyone who believed in the mission. As the girls prepared to leave for their respective schools, Daniel helped them pack. Lily had boxes of technical equipment and books. Sophie had art supplies and portfolios of her work. They would be going to different planets, pursuing different dreams, but they promised to stay in touch and visit whenever possible. The day came to say goodbye. Daniel took Lily to the transport station first. She was excited and nervous, ready for the next chapter. They hugged for a long time, and Daniel told her he loved her and believed in her. Lily said she wouldn't be who she was without him. Everything good in her life came from the day he decided to investigate that abandoned station. Sophie's departure was harder. She had always been more emotional, more openly affectionate. She cried and made Daniel promise to call her every week. He promised and told her to create beautiful things to share her gift with the world. Sophie said she would make him proud. Daniel said she already had every single day. After both girls were gone, Daniel went home to the quiet house. It felt empty in a way it hadn't since they first moved in. He walked through the rooms, seeing traces of them everywhere. Sophie's artwork on the walls. Lily's engineering projects still scattered in her workshop. Photos documenting years of memories. He sat in the living room and let himself feel the sadness. This was the natural order of things. Children grew up and left. Parents had to let them go. But knowing it was right didn't make it easier. He missed them already, and they had only been gone a few hours. His comm device buzzed. A video call from both girls. Together somehow, despite being on different ships heading in different directions. They had coordinated the call to check on him.